Hi, this is Jordi V, and today I'm going to show you how I made this track in the style of London Electricity. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Generally speaking, when I'm trying to make a drums and bass track, I start with a tempo from 170 beats per minute to 175 beats per minute. You can go higher, you can go slower, but I found that this is the pretty average range when it comes to drums and bass. Later, I will start with a basic kick and snare pattern in order to try to achieve that classical drums and bass pattern. And I treat that as a foundation to later add some extra hats, some extra percussion, and my melodic elements. So when I say about that, when I say the classical drums and bass beat, is this kind of type of pattern, I guess. So yeah. We are looking to create that as a basic foundation for our track. So if I solo my kick and my snare, and let's see what we have here. Perfect example, I guess. We have the snare steady while the kick is kind of creating the groove and making the track moving forward. So yeah, nothing special so far. With the kick, I'm using a glue compressor. And I'm activating the soft clipping button here. No EQing, nothing. Later we have the snare, and with the snare I'm using this plugin called Loop Cloud Drums from Loop Masters. This is basically a similar plugin to Battery, which allow you to play your one-shots and like your drums. I think the plugins has a lot of potential, but as for now, the current version is a bit limited since you don't have a lot of samples to be used with this plugin. And if you are trying to buy some kits online on Loopmaster, they cost a bit too much. So as for now, I like the plugin, but I don't highly recommend it. So the main idea for this plugin is you can play your one shots, or you can activate what they call a pattern, and you would be having kind of a pre-made sample. So if I activate the pattern, so yeah, classical drums and bass. This is kind of hot, I guess. So I'm not using that. I'm deactivating the pattern here. I'm just using the snare as a one shot. And the basic idea, if you want to play around with the pattern, you have your velocity here, and you can create as easily as that some variation. So you have your 0 to 100%, and you can play with the velocity. Later, they have another kind of interesting section, which is the mixer. And you can kind of mix your samples or drum loop or anything kind of in a DAW. So you have your return channel, you have your crash, some distortion, some filters here, etc. So with the snare, I'm not using that. I'm just using a simple one shot. Later, I have some EQ8. Next, we have our bongo and our open hi-hat. So I'm using again Loop Cloud drums. This time, I'm just soloing this open hat and this bongo, and I'm playing this pattern. So with the bongo, I'm playing super simple pattern, so just a one note here to create variation and some open hi-hats, but I'm going kind of heavily on the effects, so I'm adding some reverb, some delay, and some distortion to make it more stereo and make the pattern more interesting. So if we solo our percussion, our first percussion layer, you can hear the delay. It kind of acts in a great way and give the sample a lot of character. Next, I have this small snippet of a sample of a drum break. I'm just adding it at the end to create some variation again, and this acts kind of a drum roll in a drum roll, but it's just like a hi-hat fill, I guess. So nothing super complicated. The fill just to introduce the other four bars. So if we solo our first 4 elements, we have our fill here. And yeah, later I'm layering some extra top drums. So for the first layer we have this. some extra hats and like some other snare to layer with our standard snare. And I'm using the EQ3 and the EQ8 to cut some of the low frequencies in order to leave some more room for the kick and the bass later. And this track, I'm not using it, so let me delete it. Later we have another layer here. These are some rides and some closed hi-hats. The original pattern was super busy, so I tried to tame it with this kickstart plugin, which is a sidechain plugin. So this way we are sure that we don't have the first attack of the sample, we just have some of the release and we don't muddy up the mix. So I also decided to pan this track or this drum sample 13 to the left and add some reverb to make it stand within the background and not be super present within the mix, I guess. Next, I added another top layer. For this one, I have some erosion, so this is introducing some white noise to the sample. I have some auto filter to cut some of the low frequencies and add some resonance here to give it a little bit of character. I'm also using some kickstart, so some side chaining for the same reason I'm using it with the other samples, to make it less muddy and have that ducking effect that give it also some rhythmical element. So together we have some kind of a call and response between those samples. So the first one is panned 13 to the left and the second one is panned 13 to the right. So if we listen to them together, yeah, super interesting layers, and I think they speak to each other in a great way. And we have some really light drums, but super effective. Nothing crazy like some drums and bass, some jungle breaks or anything. This is just some light layers, but together they make a great foundation to later add the melodic elements too. So if I solo all my drum tracks, let me solo this, and this, my kick and my snare. Let's listen to the whole thing together. I think this is perfect, kind of light drums, but very effective. So next, let's see what we have. We have our first layer, I guess, here. Yeah, we have our roads, so let me rename these roads. I started with the roads here. So for the roads, I'm using an Omnisphere preset from Omnisphere, and it's called the Road Slush, I guess. I'm not opening it since it will be messing up my project. And you can find it within the stock preset from Omnisphere. And later I have some Valhalla Vintage Reverb to add some reverb. I'm using this compressor from Arturia FX plugin. This is a great compressor, I guess. And as you might see here, we are compressing the melody heavily in order to make it crunchy and more, I guess, compressed. And later we have this reverb intensity plugin, again from Arturia, which add that some reverb and add some texture to our sample. As for the chords, we are playing just simple chords here, nothing super complicated, but we are adding some top layer melody to make it more human, I guess, and to make it move. Also, I'm playing a bit with the velocity to make it feel like it was played with a MIDI controller or by a human, while it was just drawn like simply with the pen tool on the MIDI grid. So let me solo this part and let's listen to it. Yeah, super lush. I really love this, especially the reverb here. If I deactivate it, you will see the difference. So we no longer have that tail of reverb, and this plugin give it that grittiness and that tail of reverb that sounds so dreamy and make the track more full, I guess. So I'm reactivating it. Finally, I forgot, I also have some EQ8 to cut some of that mud. Let me reactivate the plugin. So yeah, I'm really satisfied with my FX chain here on the Rhodes. I was experimenting a bit since I just brought this Arturia FX plugin suite, and I'm really happy with it. So yeah, that's it for the Rhodes. This is our first element when it comes to melodic stuff. Later, let's see what we have here. I think I'm not using this channel. Let me unsolo. So yeah, this is, I don't think I've used this channel, so let's deactivate it for now and move to the other elements. So for the first group, I'm also not using this arpeggio. I was a little bit hesitant to which direction I will be taking the track, some kind of like that arpeggiated stuff, some kind of dreamy, I guess purely electronic drums and bass, or to go for that more jazzy, hence the inspiration by London Electricity. So finally I've decided to go to the jazzy territory, and I've used the Rhodes and some saxophone and some female vocals to give it that vibe. So finally I'm not using this arpeggios, but let's listen to it just to see what we have here. And yeah, since I'm freezing this track, it won't be necessarily working, so let's just not worry about it for now. Or let me... Yeah, this is it. So yeah, it might be another idea for a next track or for an alternative version or a remix, but as for now, I'm not using it. So let me deactivate that group. Let's move next and let me rename this channel here to bass. So, bud, I'm horrible at spelling sometimes. So bass, and for the bass, let me solo our track and loop our section here. And let's listen to what we have. So we have a classical Reese bass, again some kickstart for the sidechaining, but I'm not using it. Finally, I've decided to use the compressor, and we are sidechaining our kick to the our bass to the kick. So let's re-listen to it. So yeah, super simple, super effective, super subby stuff that works great with the light drums. And I'm just using the original note of each chord, or the root note of each chord here, and I'm adding some variation on G sharp 2 just to make the pattern more evolving, I guess, and moves more. Otherwise it will be kind of boring. Next, we have this pad section. Let me again rename my tracks here. This is a habit I'm trying to restore lately. So I'm heavily on processing my pads since I'm not looking for them to be within the center of my tracks or be super present. So with this one, I'm using this this plugin again, Serum, and this preset called 3-pitch. And later I'm adding some EQA to cut some of the low frequencies and some of the high frequencies. I'm adding also kickstart to sidechain to my kick, a little bit of saturation to saturate the low end of my track, and some reverb and some ping pong delay. Also, I'm decreasing the volume a bit, and you can see the effects of the sidechain. So it's a ducking each time the plugin is engaged, and this way I'm sure it's playing in the background and adding some texture instead of being super present. So let's re-listen to it. Super chill stuff, super simple but very effective. Again, I'm trying to make sure that each track plays a role within the overall song or composition. So yeah, if I re-solo the whole thing without the next elements, let's re-listen to this. So yeah, super chill stuff, pretty jazzy. So once I had this, the main idea was to add some organic elements. So basically some samples, some played instruments like saxophone, guitars, I don't know, vocals, something to add to this kind of digital track and make it more human and more organic. So this is something that I do a lot, adding extra samples at the end to make the track more feel more human. So for this one, I have this group here, And with the group, I have again the Arturia FX plugin, and I'm adding some tube compression. And I'm adding my favorite plugin again, the reverb intensity, for the same purpose, to add some reverb and some of that texture. I'm also cutting some of the low frequencies with the AQ3. And finally, I have this Pancake plugin, which is an auto pan plugin. You can use the auto pan within Ableton Live, but I prefer this one since it's super intuitive and super simple to drop and to not worry about. So that's it for my group effects channel. Later we have this background vocals. I'm not using any processing here since the main processing is done within the group channel. I'm just adding some delay on the return channel here to give it more texture and make the track or the sample feel more evolving. So again, this is some background vocal. Let's listen to what we have. Another thing to notice, I have this sound pitcher or sound shifter plugin from Waves, and I'm activating it here on 12 semitones. So I'm having an option to add an octave higher to any sample played within this this group. So if we solo the vocals and stay on that same idea, or let me just place the sound shifter here, this will allow us to create some variation, to have that male versus female kind of vocal. So let's listen to what we have, and I will engage the plugin. If I turn it on, so this way later in the arrangement I can create some variation. So that's it for the background vocals. I think it sounds amazing, and it will certainly add some variation, and later with the vocal lead vocal sample we will have some harmonization all around the track and make it feel more interesting, I guess. Which brings us to our next channel, which is the main vocals. Again, I'm using some compression but nothing else since we have some reverb, some delays here. So let's listen to the lead vocals.
I can smell her on your skin.
You can hear the reverb tail from the plugin.
Taste of her perfume. If my heart was yours to win, you don't deserve it, boy, you lose.
Yeah, super effective again. I really love the sample. I love my processing on it. I'm really satisfied with what I did here. So the final element for this track idea is the saxophone. And this is, I guess, a perfect example on how you can use a one-shot super creatively without overdoing things. So I have this one-shot on the saxophone. Again, I'm just having some EQ8 to cut some of the low frequencies, no further processing on it. So let me solo it. So super simple, just two notes basically played together. We are in the key of C sharp minor, so make sure that your sample is within the same key. So the idea with this, with the placement of the sample here, is to have the vocals and the saxophone play together, some kind of a call and response. So instead of having my saxophone one shot at the beginning and throughout the track, I'm purposely depicting or placing my sample at the end of each phrase from the vocals. So we have the vocals playing, later the saxophone, later the vocals and the saxophone, and it works this way. So we have that kind of call and response effect that makes the tracks feel more complicated and more interesting while we are using some simple techniques and simple samples. So if I solo the vocals and the saxophone, and the vocal is the call and the saxophone is the response, and you can really feel it here.
I can smell her on your skin.
Call, response.
The bitter taste of her
Call
perfume.
again.
If
So yeah, super repetitive. Variation on the call, the same response. This is super effective, guys. So that's it for the track. I think I covered most of the elements, or all the elements. Obviously, this is not a finished track, but I think we have the meat of the track. So maybe I will start with the pads, add some of that bass, a variation of the drums, add a little bit of vocals, have some have some fill at the end, have my first verse here, so it will be kind of that way, have my breakdown. Let me make a real draft of the arrangement since I'm being a bit lazy. So you'll be having here verse 1 or section 1, will be having here verse, just to show you how simple to arrange stuff. Verse 2, here we'll have our pads, and we'll have our vocals, and we'll be introducing our saxophone. Let me get rid of the saxophone here. And here maybe have the Rhodes playing with the pads for the intro. Sorry, the pads are here. Project is a bit messy. So yeah, pads, Rhodes. Maybe move the whole thing a bit to have it be introduced at 33 bar. And let me copy again my pads and my Rhodes. Start introducing some of the drums elements here. Add that fill, that hi-hat fill at the end of each section here, or each 4 bars, just to create some movement. Maybe have my snare or my kick here at the 1725. Also add some variation on the, add a little bit the bass maybe. And yeah, we have our intro. Let me rename this to intro. We have our, verse 2, section 1, section B of the first verse. Here we'll be calling it breakdown. And here verse 2. And I will copy my breakdown here. And we will be having an outro here. Maybe here. And let me also, within the breakdown, just play this background vocals. And if you're gonna get more complicated, maybe also put this here. And we'll be having, sorry about that, breakdown, outro. And we'll be having our build-up section here, and we'll be reintroducing the drums and the bass to make some kind of build-up. And yeah, just as simple as that, we'll be having our track. So nothing super complicated. I tend to keep the video super basic, so I just show some 8 to 16 bars loop. But for the arrangement, it doesn't have to be super complicated. So you arrange it this way. Later you will be playing with the automation, add some auto filter on your mastering channel, maybe some effects and delay, some transitional white noise, some impacts at the end of each section. And as simple as that, you have your track. So I hope you liked this tutorial. Let me know if you want me to cover any other artist, or you want me to share any other section of the track, maybe the breakdown, maybe the mixing, or deep down on how I created the Rhodes or the pads, some music theory, anything. I'm just open for ideas for tutorials. And yeah, take care and make sure to subscribe to this channel. Peace.